Thank you so much. Again, my name is Meghan Mahar. I am so excited to be here. I love it here. This conference, the community, it's just so great. It's my fourth time here in Write the Docs Portland, so you may have seen me around a little bit, but my first time presenting, so hopefully this goes well, because I am so excited to talk to you today about in-app messaging. And with in-app messaging, what I'm talking about is maybe a tooltip that pops up on your screen, kind of gives you a little more information, or maybe a banner drops down and tells you about some service downtime coming up, or the more complex thing, like an interactive in-app tutorial, right? And so these things are contextual, they're targeted, and most importantly, they're in the application with you. And I started working on in-app messaging about 2 years ago. I had an old colleague of mine hit me up, and she said she needed a tech writer at this new company that she was working for. Great, right? It was a company that had been around for a while. They were doing really good, but they really wanted to up their game. And she specifically wanted to bring me in to help develop a voice for the product that the users could be comfortable with. I was pumped. And she wanted to get the docs online, which is always great. But more importantly for me, she wanted to get in-app messaging going on. She wanted to talk to our users in the application, guide them through the application, let them know what was up based on what we wanted to tell them. I was stoked. Like, I have been dreaming this day since the days of Clippy. And for those of you that remember Clippy, he is adorable. I love him. I don't care what you say. He's got a bad rap, right? The fact that he was in the application with you, knew what you were doing, what you were trying to do, and was offering you help based on that, I just thought it was great. He was there trying to help you out before you got lost, before you had to go search for the documentation. And as documentarians, that's something we've kind of gotten used to, is knowing that our users are probably a little annoyed if they're going to our documentation, like something already went wrong and they got lost. But Clippy, man, he was there. He was there to help you out ahead of time, right? And just as a little side note, when I was looking for a GIF for Clippy, I stumbled upon this great music video that came out a couple years ago, band named Delta Heavy, song name goes, stars Clippy. So I want you to picture this. It is 20 years later, and Clippy's just been beaten down by all this new technology, right? He's down and out, living in the gutter, but he comes back. He hacks the system and just takes over the world, like has a beer with Obama. It's amazing. So, so you might not like the music, doesn't matter. Check out the video, it's great. But in the reality, we all know what happened to Clippy. He disappeared in like '04, never to be talked of again, right? And since then, I guess I always figured that to get something like that, to have a system where you could just write these messages, give them and send them to your users in the application based on where they were, based on what they were trying to do, you were going to have to get buy-in from like your entire product team, right? You were going to have to get a bunch of designers to figure out what it was going to look like. You would have to get a lot of developer time, and then just get like everybody time to really bake this into the system. But like 5 years ago, people totally started making tools that just diminished that development time, right? You could install these in-app messaging tools, and it was just like a little code snippet, right? And you could be all of a sudden publishing high-quality in-app messaging by yourself, right? There was just me, no code branches, no Git pushes, the writer getting things done. So, this is what I've been doing for the last 2 years, and I wanted to share with you what that experience has been like to really figure out what tool was going to work best for us, get buy-in from the company, plan it all out, just keep my sanity, and most importantly, establish a conversation and a relationship with our users that we could really be proud of. So how do you do that? Well, first, figure out your tool based on your requirements. Duh, right? We've done this a million times. I did this just the other week, figuring out how I want to host these slides. And just like then, there's going to be specific questions that you're going to want to ask yourself, specific to in-app messaging tools. That first one being, do you got coding skills? Because if you're the one using this tool, you really want to be honest with yourself. Now, all of these tools, don't worry, they make it very easy for you to get these messages out there without having to code. Like, that's the point, You get WYSIWYG editors, you get templates, you get out-of-the-box stuff, but some of them will allow you to get behind the scenes and dig into that code. And so if you're comfortable with some HTML, some CSS, some light JavaScript, I say look for the tools that let you do that, because then you're not going to have to worry about the starter pack, right? You can just tweak all that on your own. But if you're somebody that's not quite as comfortable with the code or really hasn't spent a lot of time there, then you're going to want to find a tool that has those out-of-the-box templates for you, that make it easy for you to style things by just dropping in a color code, right? Next, I want you to think about, do you need segmentation? And by segmentation, I'm talking about, do you need to segment your users so that this group of users sees that message, and then this other group of users see maybe a very similar message, but a different one, right? And if you need that segmentation, I want you to also think about how those users need to be segmented. If you're lucky enough that all it really is that those users go to these URLs and then those users go to all those other URLs, I mean, you're in luck, because that's what most of these tools are based on. Like, what page are they on is going to display what message. But if you have a more complex system like we did, we allow our customers to brand all the applications, and within each application there's like 2 major roles, and within each role there's like 8 different permissions, and sometimes people have tools and features turned on and whatnot. So we needed a tool that could look at that user data, and then you could segment your messages and users based on that. So it would hook in the database, they would know what your role is, what your location is, and you could group them out and then create messages based on that. So figure out what kind of segmentation you need and then look for that in your tool. And the last big question I want you to ask yourself is your use cases. You know, what are you even really trying to accomplish with these messages? If it's something simple, like just like, hey, there's this new feature, or here's a little more info, you know, look for a more simple tool that can just do that. But if you need the more complex tutorials, the step-by-step stuff, you know, go find one that specializes in that. That was something that we needed. We're technically a service relationship management application. And anybody that has dealt with a management application knows that they get super complex. But that might not be the case for you, so you're not going to need all those bells and whistles. You know, say your use cases are based more on mobile apps and mobile devices. There are tools for in-app messaging specifically for that. Or maybe you want to gamify your app. You know, look for those tools that offer that. A few other things that I kind of wish we had thought about when we were coming up with our tool is message management and testing. And with message management, it's really just about how easy do they make it for you to, you know, organize your messages. You know, are you going to need to have duplicate multiple versions of it because you got to translate them to different languages? It can get messy very quick, and that is something that I kind of wish we had focused on more. And then testing. How can you make sure that these messages are going to be displaying to the right users at the right time, you know, and can they easily click through? So really look about what that process is like from QA to staging to you know, production. And so figure out those tools, get all the answers to those questions, and then just start looking. And because it's easy. There's been so many tools that have popped up. They're just all over the place. You know, and I'm not going to tell you exactly which tool that we picked because I want you to figure out which one works for you. It's going to pop up there, don't worry. But there's just so much information out there. So start digging around, ask yourself those questions I just went through, and figure out what works for you. There's even like a top 10, you know, coming up at the end. So figure out what tool works for you, and then get ready to talk to your bosses, right? But don't worry, because honestly, trying to get buy-in on an in-app messaging tool was the easiest buy-in I have ever had to do. You know, everybody wants to talk to their users. It does not matter what department you're in, they have something to say. So I want you to get that tool, get a free trial, and then just start coming up with examples that would work for like each department in your company, right? Customer service, the easiest one. Like take their most annoying support ticket and create a quick tooltip out of it, right? Or take their most common question, the most time-consuming one, and then come up with a quick tutorial. Marketing, another very simple one to figure out. This is one we came up with to tell our users about a new version of the mobile app we had, and gave them a link to just go download it right away. You know, they're going to be excited. Another one for marketing, there's an upcoming conference. You can tell the users about it right in your app. Design team can totally get in on this. Our design team wanted to put a survey out to our users to see what their user experience is like, to figure out where we're kind of falling behind, what we can improve on. So instead of an email that just gets like pushed over to the spam folder, we came up with a quick one that popped up and said, hey, we got a tutorial or a survey out there. If you want to take it, please, we would love it. You know, here's a link to it right away. So there's a lot of ways you can really sell this. And I think there's actually even a speech tomorrow specifically about getting buy-in for your documentation team. So maybe check that one out as well. But hopefully the plan is you've got all these ideas, they see its worth, and now you've got your tool. What's next? Next, create templates for each of your use cases. Again, not something super, you know, new to us, right? But still very important. And not just for yourself in case you get those last-minute requests for a message, but also for your users. Because if all of your service announcements look the same every time they pop up, they're not going to get freaked out anymore, right? And if all your release announcements look exactly the same, you're going to start getting like this Pavlovian response that they're like salivating at this release announcement because they remember what what that flashing light means. So figure out what those things look like. Think about your fonts, your headings, your bullet lists, your links, your buttons, stuff that the writers might not normally think about. What does your primary, secondary, dismiss button look like? And what type of message are you gonna put together? And then go talk to your designers and your developers and get the CSS of your application. Because even if you do not like the colors and fonts that they're using, it's not the time to change that. You want these messages to look like they were created as part of the app. Like, even though your tool is separate, you want it to look like they were baked into this. Because if they don't, they're gonna think it's spam and they're gonna freak out. And then you're gonna try to make up for that and like include their name or your image and like it's all happy-go-lucky. They're just gonna freak out even more. So you want these things to look exactly like it, and you want these templates in place. Next, I want you to create your own build process. I want you to think of each of these messages as a separate product feature. And again, since this tool is separate, you don't need to follow along with the same cadence, the same sprint cycle as your actual product development team, but you still want to have your own build process in place. Just trust me on this one. Get yourself a Jira board, get yourself a workflow. And that first step in that workflow, I want you to think about the actual requirements for your messages. Like, who even needs to see this message? And what are you trying to tell them? And what do you want them to get out of it, right? So what are you doing with it? And then next, I want you to spend time on design. And you've already got your templates, so you know what it looks like. But with design, I want you to think of the user experience. How many steps are you gonna have in your tutorial? What are you pointing to? What step is coming next? Have that all figured out, because it's only after you know what that experience is like that you can actually start writing the copy for these messages. Because that copy is really dependent on that user experience. What are you pointing to? You don't need to tell them the button name in your copy because you're pointing right at it. So figure out all that and then get your copy down. And once that's all done, I want you to spend even more time on testing. And as a tech writer for like 12 years, I've always tested out my docs, right? You go in the application, you go through your steps, make sure it all works. But with in-app messaging, you really want to get in there like your QA team gets in on the product. You want to make sure that you can easily close out of a message without any problems. You want to make sure they can go from step to step by step without falling off somewhere along the course. And I even want you to like wave your mouse all around the interface to make sure that that message doesn't pop up really annoyingly if somebody does that, because there's somebody out there that does that, I'm sure. So hopefully now you've got your tool, you've got your templates, you've got your build process, you are good to go, right? Not quite, not quite. There are some psychological aspects I want you to think about when it comes to in-app messaging. And the first big one being, I want you to consider your impact. The roles are kind of reversed for in-app messaging, whereas before your users are going out to your documentation, they're opting in. But now, like, you're in their territory. You're going in where they try to get stuff done. So you want to tread kind of lightly, right? Like, you want to be very aware of their time. You want to make it easy for them. And you want to make them come back for more. So how do you do that? Well, for tutorials specifically, you want to let them know what they're getting into. This is an example of a tutorial we did for our call center application, where basically truck drivers would call in, they'd be on the road, they need to get service done, and they need to figure out where the closest service provider is, and like that could do that for them. Well, here is the intro to our tutorial. It says straight up, here's the scenario. A driver calls from Denver, says a big snowstorm's coming in, and he needs his tire service before he crosses the mountains. We're going to use a dealer locator to find the best and closest dealer for their service. 6 steps, 10 minutes, let's get started, right? It tells them right there what they're going to learn from this and how long it's going to take them. They know what skills they're going to walk away with, and they know how much time to set aside. And that idea of like 6 steps, 10 minutes, that's been so far kind of our max that we've used. We've actually technically normally go less than that. And so we don't know yet if that's kind of the sweet spot of the max, but we do know that we have not been getting any complaints from our users so far. And more importantly, when we look at the analytics of our tutorials, users aren't falling off. They're not giving up halfway through. The ones that start it are finishing it. So far we're sticking with that. Honestly, they're more about 4 steps at most. What's the next thing you can do? Allow them to skim. This is another example of a tutorial we had in that same call center application. It's our getting started one. And if you'll notice, if you check out just the headings of these, they flow together independent of the rest of the copy. You know, it's like first, check out the sidebar. Next, here's your case list. Up here is your search, and over there is your Amazon Connect. So that they could skim through each step and not feel like they're missing a beat. You know, they don't need to read the entire thing to still feel the smoothness of the steps. And we also added in some things like bullet lists. We've got some nice bolding going on. We've got the actual icons we're talking about in the steps so that they could easily skim through and then focus on what they actually care about. Speaking of focus, the next thing I want you to do, think of their eye movements. This is that same tutorial, only this is what it looks like when the user is going through the system. And you'll notice I have them go from left to right, and then they're going to go back to center. Now, I'm not necessarily ordering this based on maybe the most important things, the flashy things. I'm making it easy on their eyes to go through and really like take everything in. They're not darting back and forth. And you're not going to always be able to get this done, right? Like it depends on what you're trying to tell them to do. It depends on your actual application and all that stuff. But for a getting started tutorial specifically, this is your best chance to be able to like have that control and just really think about that and just make it easy for them. So you've got all that going in. The next big thing I want you to remember is just don't interrupt them. And by don't interrupt them, what I really mean is try not to. And by try not to, what I really mean is save the interruptions for specific scenarios. Because if Zach from accounting is going in on a Friday, and he really just wants to get the happy hour, but he's still got to submit everything for payroll, and he goes to the payroll page, and you come barging in with this big, huge light box to be like, oh, you can totally do this on our mobile app. It's great. He's just going to dismiss it because he's got shit to do, and he doesn't care, right? He's got to get to happy hour. But if you save that message and then wait to have it display after he hits the submit button and say, dude, next time you can totally use the mobile app, he's going to be much more receptive because he would have gotten his task done. He would have had a moment to read. So don't interrupt them. But if you do need to, because you're gonna need to, you know, there's gonna be service announcements they need to know about, or maybe you just want them to know how to do something before they just try it. There's some ways you can really ease that interruption. And the first one being, give them an out. You know, this is another example for that same call center application. And in that application, there's basically like 4 major steps that a rep has to take to go from creating a case to closing it, right? And we wanted to be able to create tutorials for this, but we didn't want to give them all that information at once. You know, these cases can go on for days. So we were like, what do we do with this? What we did was we basically created a short and sweet tutorial for each status of the case. And instead of having a big old light box pop up, we had this, you know, nice simple tooltip that pointed right to the case status that would pop up whenever they would go to a case for the first time that was in that status and say, hey, you know, in this status, you're going to mark which services were supplied, and then you're going to close a case. And the idea there being, if that's enough information for them, because they've done the other tutorials, they've been in the application already, they know where the services are, they know where the close button is, they're good. They've gotten out. They know what to do. They can close out of that. Another thing that we did for our users to give them an out was we also made PDFs of each of our tutorials, and I spent like no time on that, but it was huge to have them there for the users that don't want to necessarily go through tutorials. We gave them an out. And with that PDF, basically what I did is I just took the copy that we have for each step and like put that in the left side of the page, took a nice screenshot of what the tooltip looked like in the application, put that on the right side of the page, like bada boom, bada bing, you got a PDF. It was just great for them to be able to go back on their own time and give them an out for like if they don't want to do the tutorials. Another thing you can do to kind of ease that interruption is to give them a second chance. This one cracks me up because we would have banners pop up and tell people about a service downtime coming up, right? And we gave them a dismiss button and we assumed they were going to read it, then they were going to dismiss it. It's not always the case. Like these users would go in, again, like have something to do. They got stuff to get done. So they just click out of it. And then they come to us and then complained about how they did know about something. And I was like, dude, I can tell that you saw this and you closed out of it. And then I realized that so many's reaction is just to close out of things. So for things that are regular occurring, like service announcements and release announcements, we combated this by just like adding an icon next to your help button, your log out button, whatever button that's kind of off to the side but always there, so that they could go back and read those messages for as long as they're pertinent. And it's worked out really well for us, but still annoying that they dismiss without reading. So the last big thing I want you to take away from this to really ease your users into in-app messaging is to beware the pop-up monster. It is exciting to suddenly have all of this power, right? I've been writing for years and years and years just hoping that my users are going to read the documentation. You know, just knowing that their life is going to be so much better if they would just read the documentation. And now I'm in the application with them, right? Like I'm talking right to them. I can just tell them exactly what's up. But you got to tread kind of lightly because nobody wants that. Nobody wants that at all. So how do you avoid that? First, just keep a calendar. At this company, we use Jira, so I went ahead, got myself a Jira board, I've got myself a page, put myself on a calendar, and then I can easily see when I'm publishing any of those messages. This one specifically has different colors for different products. I am not putting that many messages out in a month, trust me. But I can easily see on the first of the month, that's when we told our users, hey, there's this survey, please fill it out. 2 weeks later, we're like, thank you so much, I really appreciate your feedback. We're gonna come out with some enhancements based on that really soon. And then after that, we'll know in a couple weeks, we're going to have another message go up that's like, oh, look, totally as promised, here are those messages we're talking about. So keep a calendar. It just kind of keeps yourself in check. And because I want you to think about how often you're putting those messages out there. I don't know yet, what that magic number is of how much is too much. But a way that you can kind of dive into that for your application specifically is to see if you can get some user metrics, right? See how many of your users are daily versus weekly versus monthly. Because if most of your users are daily, coming in every single day, multiple times a day, you can get away with a little bit more frequency, right? But if they're mostly, more of a monthly or weekly, or even there's a specific segment of those users that are monthly or weekly, then they're going to, then you got to do it a lot less, because what you don't want is you don't want a message to pop up to your users every single time. I went too far ahead of that one. Every single time. And so, which leads into that, my next one is, don't forget to disable old messages. This is one I totally forgot about in the very beginning, because you're going to have some that are obviously time sensitive, and you're going to have a start date and an end date. But for all those other ones that are just like informational, they're just like kind of telling people what's up, they can add up really quick, and you're going to forget about them. So every time you go in to publish a new message, just see if there's one you can disable. See if there's one you can get rid of. And every so often, I want you to think about it, what it would be like for a completely new user to come in your system. Like, how many possible messages could pop up that have built up over the last couple months? And are they going to see one on every single page they go to? So like I said, try to see if there's some you can disable before you publish your next one. And the last and most important thing I want you to remember when it comes to all these in-app messages, a way to ease them into it, is just don't be afraid to push back. Your company is gonna get excited. They're gonna be so pumped. They're gonna see how quickly you can put these messages out there and how many users are seeing them, and they're gonna just put in requests for everything. But I want you to go back to that calendar you have and say, we just did one last week, you gotta wait. Or go to your templates and say, does this request even fit into one of the templates we currently have? And even just think about the request in general, does it even warrant a message? And if you're still kind of on the fence, then maybe try to get a little creative and see if you can segment those users down to exactly who actually is gonna care about those messages. Because, it's your job to really control the dialogue with your users through these messages. And not everything warrants an in-app message. Save that for the release notes. For the in-app messages, I want you to put stuff out there that affects the user experience, and most importantly, is part of your product vision. So that's it. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Meg Mahar, Meghan with an H. If any of you use one of these tools, please holler at me. I feel like I've been an island party of one for the last 2 years. If there's something you're interested in and just have more questions, definitely reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter, Raven Writing LLC. If you want these slides, I got them up on my website, ravenwriting.net. It's the only one under conference talk so far. If you're going to the party tonight, I will be there wearing this, so find me, let me know how I did, and thank you again for spending your time with me. Have a great rest of your day.